Hello everyone! Welcome back to the channel and welcome back to Planet Zoo. We're back in Arcadia for the beginning of Season 2 of development. And it's going to be wetlands and potentially mountains that we do over here. We've got a large area here. You can see I've had to run a path all the way through from the entrance to Old Town. Now, that's not a worry right now, it's just I was having a little bit of an issue with the train, and I'm still working on sorting that out. But I have promised for a long time a management update, that's going to come soon. But today's episode is going to be about terraforming our wetlands biome. This is also going to be the first port of call for our underground metro system. And if we just flash over to Old Town, you can see right here, this part of Old Town hasn't yet been developed, and that is going to be our second metro station. And now, if we head on over again to our entrance area, you can see here, this campsite area hasn't yet been developed either. And that is going to be our third metro station. Now in the mountains, what I'm planning on doing is having a second mountain here and a third mountain, and they're all going to be joined by gondolas. So the gondolas are going to sweep all the way down through the wetlands and back up to each mountain, and we're going to have little areas where people can get off and stuff all the way through there. And that's plenty of transport rides to go in, lots of development this season. It's going to be a lot of episodes. Now, of course, I started season 1 midway through to late stage last year, so I expect us to have kind of like a year's worth of content out of season 2, following us all the way through into the end of this year. I'm really excited to continue developing this zoo, so let's dive straight into our first speed build as the rain stops. Perfect timing. So the first thing to do is to actually put in our middle mountain range, and the idea is the gondolas are going to come across, dip down into a couple of habitats on their route, and then there'll be a station here where guests can get off and see a little bit more of the mountain range. And then there'll be a third mountain at the back of this habitat where they can carry on to see the final pieces of it. We're going to have stairs going up onto this mountain range, so don't worry about that. We're going to be able to work that out as we go. Now, the first area I want to work on is this area underneath where our train kind of comes through. So guests are going to be able to quickly spot what's going on in this habitat as they go through the train tunnel, but we're just making sure that there's enough space for all 16 of our animals to be fit in here. Now, one thing I do need to mention is this is a huge area, so we're probably going to come back at some point and add more animals to this. If we can kind of like merge the biomes and stuff into one and kind of have a nice transitional period as things go through. But for now, we're going to focus on the 16 habitats that I have in mind. The first one up by that train tunnel is going to be for the capybara. Now, this area is kind of going to have 3 South American animals in it. They're all grassland. You can see I've made some little signages just in the background there where you're going to be able to see little snippets of the animals that we're going to have in here. Now, I'm going to talk to you about what they are. So, South America, grassland, aquatic. 3 key components of this first section. They're going to contain the capybara, the dwarf caiman, and the giant otter. Then we're going to move into a North America temperate aquatic area where we're going to have the American alligator, the California sea lion, and the North American beaver. As you go through this tunneled area that we're digging out now, you're going to come to the Asian temperate area where we're going to have the Malayan tapir, the red-crowned crane, and the gar-rail. Then there'll be an Asian tropical aquatic area featuring the small-clawed otter, proboscis monkey, saltwater crocodile, and wild water buffalo. We're then going to have a couple of special areas, one just to the east of that middle mountain range where we're going to house the Nile lechwe and the pygmy hippo in a kind of African area, and then the platypus, which is going to be in this bottom area, kind of around where the Asian-based animals are going to be. And of course, the Nile lechwe and the pygmy hippo's location will then lead us into an African grasslands and African kind of desert area where we will kind of wrap around the back of Old Town. And that kind of made sense to me. We're also obviously going to be fitting in our exhibits just in various locations, potentially in that underground area going under that middle mountain range, and that's what we're going to do. So this has been a mix of using the flatten to foundation tools. Obviously it's very basic at the moment and we haven't had time to kind of dig deeper, but what I want to do is get a base coverage down of the water and the terrain And then as we move in and start filling this place up with habitats, we'll then start making little adjustments to the terrain and getting it all right. This is also the first massive terrain kind of modification that I'm doing in this zoo, which was a flat land to begin with. So I want to make sure that there's some variations in the height of our exhibits and our landscaping in general, which is why when they come out of the other side of that mountain range, the whole landscape drops down a little bit as well. And here we are, just adjusting that middle mountain range, just to make sure that it's a little bit bigger. I've got to remember that we're going to be having habitats on here as well, so we're going to need to use quite a little bit of space and real estate here to make sure that there's enough space for us to actually put in our mountain biome animals. Basically, we need more space, and I haven't actually factored in the animals that I'm going to have in this biome, so it might well be that we make a couple of adjustments, maybe have a second mountain range somewhere else in the zoo so we can fit in a few more animals. I have eliminated a couple of aquatic animals that I don't really want in this part of the zoo. A lot of the stuff here is going to be kind of tropical, temperate, maybe a couple of grassland themed areas. So the likes of the king penguins, which are aquatic animals, they're more suited to the taiga and tundra biomes, which is going to happen somewhere else. So we're going to be having those animals housed there instead. The platypus coming down here, because it's a purely aquatic animal and it's from the Oceania region, it was difficult to fit in. Like I mentioned before, we've kind of got 3 or 4 animals from each continent, and the platypus being restricted to Oceania, it made it quite difficult to fit that one in. But we've been able to put that in as a kind of like backdrop to the Asian tropical areas, because the platypus can survive in a tropical environment as well as a temperate and grassland area, so it fits in quite nicely here. Back to the terraforming. Now, everything here looks a little bit messy at first, and it's quite difficult to see the bigger picture on it, and that's something that I always have issue with when it comes to terraforming. But in my opinion, as long as you get a basic idea when you're doing these initial stages of terraforming, and make sure that your levels are okay and you can match up with your water line and stuff like that, so it doesn't look like too much of a harsh drop into some water, it's fine. You can cover up any imperfections with rock work and things like that, and I think that's where some of these things can really shine. So all we're going to be doing today is making sure that we map things out, and then we are actually going to put in some habitat barriers for every single habitat. Then I'm going to put the labels on them, and then we can start thinking about how we're going to design the habitats themselves. So what I want to do is essentially put in a blueprint for this next phase of development today, and then we'll start expanding on that blueprint in the next coming episodes and weeks. The first one we're going to do is going to be the capybara. That's going to come out next week, and then we'll start seeing the development throughout this section of the zoo. And if you remember all the way back in episode 1 when I first started designing Old Town, I did something very similar. The only problem was I didn't spend a lot of time actually fleshing out that area, which means underneath the water there, it's a little bit of a mess. It's very flat and one-dimensional. Whereas here, I want to make sure that I'm doing things right from the beginning. So when it comes to terraforming, I always just try and make use of as many of the tools that are at our disposal as I possibly can. Mainly I'm using flatten the foundation mixed with the terrain stamp tools, because the terrain stamps give you a nice flat block of texture and height difference, and then you can use your push and pull tools just to create some little imperfections and stuff and make it look like it's not so much of a like artificial placement of terrain. I like to just mess everything up a little bit and then smooth it all out. That's the kind of technique that I go for. And it's just all about making sure that you're kind of creating natural flows. Like when you kind of like think about how mountains are created, it tends to be through volcanic activity first, which forces ground upwards, and then everything kind of develops over time. Soil and sediment are deposited by the wind and all of that sort of stuff. And then you get these lovely areas carved down the sides of mountains by water as it rains on there. It starts taking up a natural path and moving sediment and dirt further down the mountain, so that kind of creates the natural shape of the mountain, as well as kind of like freeze-thaw cycles and everything. I'm not here to give you a science lesson, but that's kind of what I like to think about when I'm creating those mountains and stuff, and how we end up taking an artificial looking plot of land and turning it into something that looks really nice and natural. And it's weird to think that at some point, not too long ago, like at the beginning of this episode, this was all flat land, and now it's kind of been already gotten to a stage where it's looking a lot better than it was, and a lot more different from the rest of the map that we have so far. Thinking about the fact that I want to have every single animal in the game in this zoo, I think we've only got about, 13 species in so far. This is going to take us up to 29, and we'll have probably covered up about a third of the map maybe. We're going to have to find ways to fit in animals in other places, so we need to have one eye on the fact that we've got a lot more animals to fit in here, and we're going to need to be a little bit more conservative with how we're using the landscape. So some of the habitats may need to be a bit smaller, and we're going to have a think about how we're going to fit in other animals into these areas. Obviously, we've got like 5 different continents here that we're going to be using, and it's going to be really good to be able to play around with those. And even though this is a wetlands biome, we could always develop it into something that, you know, is temperate or tropical. So any animal could fit into this biome that fits with those themes, and we'd be fine with that. Back to what we've been doing today. I was smoothing out all of the landscape, and what I like to do when I'm doing this smoothing work is I just change the terrain paint so that I can see exactly where I've gone over with the brush. So you can see here we're painting it all stone. It's not going to stay stone, but I like to know that I've smoothed this area out, and then we carry on smoothing other parts of it out. So all of this is being painted rock work, but it's going to swap back to something else in the future. And what I'll do before I finish this part of the episode is, once I've done all of the smoothing work, I'll repaint everything in the kind of basic ideas of what I'm looking to get from the actual habitats here. And this little area here, I thought we could bulk this out a little bit more, raise the terrain here, have another smaller area of water, and then we'll put a barrier so that water again is falling into the main section of the river that's running all the way through here. This took a little bit of tweaking, but again, that creates another habitat for us, and quite a large one. We could put like hippopotami here, or we could make this an area for the red-crowned crane, where we then have the Malayan tapir and the gharial somewhere else. But again, that feeds into our Asian-centric area on this side of the mountain. So again, coming along, doing more smoothing work, and once that's all done, I'll repaint all of the terrain, so we've kind of got a basic idea of how I want everything to look once it's painted. And we're just finishing off the final barriers here for the platypus, and everything is now in place, all 16 habitats, apart from the giant otter, which, as you may already know, is going to be in that campsite there, so that's on number 16. Next up, we're going to try and do a little bit of pathing, so as you can see here, I'm continuing this cobble, it's not going to stay as cobble, and here we need to kind of work out how our guests are going to access this underground area. Now, my original idea was to have like a load of different maze-like pathways going through and linking multiple habitats, and just kind of have this as like a flat, predominantly water-based area. And I think that's quite a good idea, and that might work in the other area just on the opposite side of the underground area, but for this main area, I think we can't actually do that. It's going to be too much space, and I maybe shouldn't have built this middle mountain so close to the other mountain. I think there's a bit too short a gap. Anyway, coming in here, we've managed to work out a couple of pathways to bring guests down into this underground area. We could put a couple of vendors in here, but my main focus for this bit is going to be exhibits. So we're going to have a couple of exhibits under the ground here, and then more dotted throughout the pathways as guests are moving around. But I'm pretty happy with how things are looking. It certainly bodes well for the rest of the series. We're just going to move back over here and work out how to get guests to this next series of habitats. Now, as we know, the habitats currently are made of glass, so we are going to null barrier every single one of them eventually, but for now I need to get some pathing in there, and you're going to see a couple of different elevations and stuff, so that guests are going to have an opportunity to look down. We're going to build a viewing platform as well, and then a couple of bridges going through. And what I'd like to do is have this be a complete loop, so we're going to need to work out a way to get our guests back round the other side where the alligators are, and then have them join up with this path to take the bridge back across. And here I want the path to come up into the air. We're going to probably put in a few like rocks and stuff here just to cover all of this up, so it doesn't look like just this floating path in the middle of the air. and we'll try and use the water in there as well and have bits of it poking through so that those streams are a little bit smaller and stuff. I am very conscious of the fact that a lot of this looks like one large flat plane, and you're quite, you know, it doesn't look amazing. But that's all part of the initial development process. For me anyway, personally, I like to get a baseline down and then start developing that and improving that. It's also nice to look back on what you've done and see those things in action. And here's where I thought, we're running out of space here. We've got to get that staff entrance there. So we're going to make a viewing platform. And it was a nice viewing platform. It covers the American alligator and the beavers. And then we can continue this path all the way along and have it drop down to where the Nile lechwe and pygmy hippo are. But I'm also going to have it shoot off this side as well and come down and loop around. It'll then cut through the side of the mountain and loop back around and meet up with the bridge that takes them by the beaver habitat. We're not going to do the other side of things today. This is the new area we're going to work on. I hope you've enjoyed this video as bitty as it's been. I really appreciate you watching, and I'm sorry it's not probably the content you were expecting this week, but I think it's important nonetheless. Thank you for watching, and I will see you all next time. Bye-bye.